What's up, plant lovers? Devin is here, and today we're gonna be talking about growing perennials in containers. So my wife and I are spending the summer in Vienna, Austria, and over here in Europe, they really take their container gardening to the next level. Most gardeners either have simply a balcony or a patio, and they really do a wonderful job of filling their outdoor spaces with lots of luscious plant life. And many of those plants are perennials. So in this video, I'm gonna be going through my top 20 perennials for growing in containers. And along that journey, going through those 20 plants, I will be delving into some really important tips and tricks for getting the most out of your perennials and for caring for them from spring to summer to fall to winter, year in and year out. So let's get right into it. So my first plant on the list would be lavender. Lots of beautiful different species of lavender that you can grow. I tend to go for the intermedia hybrids, which are a little bit more winter hardy. They're evergreen, they're very drought tolerant. But one thing, the first tip that you should always ensure with all of your potted plants that are perennials in particular is that you provide them with drainage holes. Yes, that is essential for maintaining the health of your plant during the summertime, but it's even more important if you're going to be leaving your plants outdoors in the wintertime. There's nothing that will kill a plant faster than soggy soil that freezes over in the wintertime. That will immediately cause root rot and cause your plant to die. And the second tip is that your plants in containers do need to be diligently maintained. As a container plant, it is very clear if they're looking good or not. So here you can see lavender that has not been diligently maintained, and look at what a mess it has become. All right, so the next plant on the list is Trachycarpus fortunei. This would be the windmill palm. And this is an evergreen palm tree that has this wonderful insulation from its matted trunk. This is what allows it to be the most winter hardy palm tree in the world. Now, while most of the plants on this list are quite drought tolerant, it is imperative to remind you that it is essential to maintain a good watering schedule. Plants in containers dry out much faster than plants in the ground. Look at what happens to a plant that is allowed to stay too dry for too long. A lot of wasted time and a lot of wasted money. However, that being said, plants like this windmill palm that you can generally leave outside all winter long, you will cut down on your watering in the wintertime, but not to zero. You're still gonna wanna water your plants maybe every 2 to 3 weeks if you're not getting any supplementary precipitation. All right, so next on the list would be Oleander. This beautiful plant is best if you're growing the dwarf varieties that stay a little bit shorter in our containers. This is a very important point to note, is that when we are considering these perennials, some of which we can maintain outside all year round, others, depending on what zone you are in, where you live, may need to be overwintered indoors or in a garden shed or garage. In particular, something like Oleander, which gets quite large, might not be a great houseplant, but should be overwintered in a garage or shed that has access to a window so that it still has a little bit of brightness. A plant like Oleander, as soon as those nighttime temperatures start to go below 40 degrees, that's when we bring them inside into our shed, into our garage. Likewise, when spring arrives the next year, as those nighttime temperatures start remaining above 40, that's when we bring them back out. Now, while they are overwintering, it is imperative that your plant remains in kind of a range between like 40 and 60. You don't want it to be in a garage that has some sort of furnace that keeps it at like 70 degrees. That's going to kind of force your plant to continue growing through the winter, but that growth will be uneven and weak and not very nice. So it is important to overwinter each plant in a specific manner according to that plant. I have lots of different videos showing how to overwinter specific plants, and I'll leave a few of them in the description below so you can go check out those individual videos. The last point is that plants like Oleander get quite large. You need to put them in pots that you can actually physically move. That's huge. That's so important. So make sure that you have some way of actually physically moving those plants to a protected area over the winter. All right, next on the list would be olive plants. In particular, I love to grow Olea europea, which is the classic European olive. And this is a plant that Looks great outside, but it also is a fantastic indoor house plant. So this is a plant that I would actually bring indoors to overwinter inside my home in a bright sunny window because it looks so fantastic. Now these plants are known to live for hundreds of years. So it is a plant that you can definitely pass on from one generation to the next. Now the next on the list would be the Japanese maple. These are stunning structural plants, a plethora of beautiful different foliage types, absolutely stunning cultivars that you can grow in containers successfully. Now, while these plants are very hardy, for most of us, we can definitely leave them outside. One specific note that you need to be aware of when growing perennials in containers outside is that I live in zone 6B. I need to ensure that my plants are winter hardy to zone 5. So I need to add an additional zone to my sort of to my thought process for plants that I will leave outside when grown in containers. And the reason is plants that are grown in the ground have the insulation of the surrounding earth. Plants that are grown in containers do not have that insulation, just a small little section of soil and maybe, the edges of your container. That is not going to provide the same amount of insulation as the earth does. So you need to add an additional zone to your thought process for plants that you will leave outside all year round. So in my zone 6 garden, I need to make sure that my plants that I leave outside are in zone 5. Likewise, if you're in zone 7, a container grown plant should be hardy to zone 6. Okay, so ensuring that your plant can withstand one additional level of hardiness is a very important thing to note. Now let's get into a few structural evergreen plants. One of my very favorites would be laurel. These are evergreen all year round, of course, and they provide a wonderful container grown hedging. It's great to place along the edges of your balconies, the edges of your patios, to create some sort of privacy screening from you and your neighbors, which, maybe you want to sunbathe in the nude, or maybe just have a little not hear or see your neighbors all summer long, and laurel is an excellent choice. Do note that plants grown in containers, a very general rule of thumb, a plant that's going to grow 6 feet tall should have a container that is about half that height in the height of the container. So a 6 foot tall laurel should have a container that's about 2.5 to 3 feet tall in height. That's going to provide enough space for that root ball to be nice and happy and not like overly scrunched, okay? You need to provide an ample sized container for plants that get large like laurel, all right? The next is Thuja, Arborvitae, in particular some of the dwarf varieties. The non-dwarf varieties can get like 50, 100 feet tall, so make sure you're growing the right varieties when you're selecting your Thuja for a container. And this is of course another great privacy plant, an evergreen hedging sort of plant. And the plants on this list, I've chosen plants that don't need to grow roots super deep. Other plants that are not on this list that are perennials are not included in the list, perhaps because they are plants that require a very deep root growth. As you can see, these plants here need much more space for the roots to grow, and because they don't have that extra space, they're consistently drying out repeatedly, and that eventually over time will lead to a very weak plant that will leave you feeling unsatisfied as a gardener. Okay, next on the list would be boxwoods, another structural evergreen plant, very low maintenance, very low key, very long lived. These are perfect for your front door, buttressing both sides. And here you can see when we're growing our perennials in containers, it is essential that you do not plant the top of your plant soil with the top of the pot. You need to give it like a 4 to 6 inch buffer zone. And that buffer zone, what we will do in the fall or early winter is we will add a 4 to 6 inch layer of compost, leaf mold, or even bark mulch. And the reason is that's going to give it a little bit of extra insulation over the winter time. And then as it starts to break down that following spring and summertime, it's going to provide your plant with additional nutrients that will be essential for your plant's health. Okay, so make sure you do that every single year, because from one season to the next, your plant will use the nutrients in its soil and it's going to need a replenishing of nutrition. So in the early wintertime, giving it that 4 to 6 inch layer of compost, leaf mold, or bark mulch will provide it multiple different benefits. And you don't need to remove that in the springtime, simply allow it to remain. Now the next on the list is Hydrangea paniculata. This is my personal favorite hydrangea for growing in containers because they tend to be a little bit more drought tolerant. And this is a dwarf variety, stays shorter, it's not gonna grow 6 to 8 feet tall, stays about 3 feet tall. Lots of great new dwarf varieties out there. Now, just like I was mentioning, putting that mulch in the early winter time, additionally, it's important to, if some of that mulch has been utilized over the winter time, add a fresh layer in the early summertime to your container plants to help lock in the moisture and keep your root zones cool in the summertime so that they're not utilizing all of that moisture super fast, okay? Next on the list is probably most people's favorite hydrangea. That would be the big leaf hydrangea, Hydrangea macrophylla. And these plants are stunning, but they do tend to wilt pretty quickly. So you really need to stay on top of your watering for the big leaf hydrangeas. Perhaps even adding some drip hoses to the tops of your containers, if you have a lot of containers, can be very helpful. While if your plants do dry out, they will tend to bounce back rather quickly. Over time, if you're allowing your plants to consistently wilt and then bounce back, wilt, bounce back, it's gonna lead to a lowering of health of your plant over time, and that's not what we want. But the cool thing about growing big leaf hydrangeas in containers is you can much more easily manipulate the acidity of your soil. You can make it more acidic, which will turn your flowers more blue, purple, or you can make your soils more alkali, which will lead to more reds and pinks. And then you can take those containers, put them right into your flower beds, and it's absolutely stunning. You can really add those splashes of color in your flower beds with container grown plants at the perfect height very easily, and that's super fun to do. Now, my top choice for a low maintenance perennial plant in a container would be Sempervivum hens and chicks. They're evergreen, they're super cool, they have that awesome geometry. And here in Europe, they oftentimes will use these as centerpieces for tables at cafes because they're beautiful plants, but they stay low, so they're not gonna block conversation, they're not gonna block the vision between you and your fellow diners at a cafe or a restaurant. So beautiful, very, very low maintenance plants. And they just kind of fill out, overflow from season to season. Very fun to watch. Now, another perennial that I have fallen in love with growing is Agapanthus. Those blue flowers are gorgeous, and they're a very no-fuss plant. This is a plant that goes totally dormant in the wintertime in my Zone 6B garden, and I actually overwinter these in my garage. I don't give them any light, I don't give them any water, bring them back out in the springtime, and they just grow like clockwork. Now, this plant is definitely a good candidate for doing a root pruning once every 3 years or so. And what that basically allows, it allows for a regeneration of those bottommost roots, which can tend to wrap around the bottom of your container and actually will die after a few years of being wrapped around that container. So every few years, you want to pop your plants out, just prune off 1 or 2 inches and give it some fresh soil, and your plant will thank you for that additional amount of love. Remember, the more love that we give our plants by doing work like that, the more love they provide us with beauty. So never be shy about putting in the elbow grease and getting the work done. Next on the list would be Dianthus. I love Dianthus because they provide beautiful flowers and rich colors that last for a long time, and they're delightfully fragrant. But just like I was mentioning earlier, I'm growing my plants in Zone 6B, so I need to make sure that the Dianthus that I choose for my containers are hardy to which zone? You got it, Zone 5. And you know, I'm not a big fan of growing perennials in mixed containers because over a few years, one plant tends to win out and the others tend to die away. So I do tend to stay away from mixed containers full of different perennials. However, planting a few different Dianthus together in the same pot looks phenomenal, and they all grow kind of in a wonderful unity. Now, if you have a windy location, a balcony that's, you know, on the 5th floor, or a patio that gets lots of wind, plants that are grasses are awesome options. 2 of my favorites would be Stipa tenuissima and Sanguisorba tana. They're light and airy, drought tolerant, look fantastic. I love growing them in 3s, really low key, looks beautiful. Next on the list would be coral bells. There's so many different flavors. There's so many different colored foliage out there. You can just mix and match lots of different ones together. And this is also a good reminder that when it comes to growing plants, you know, foliage is more important than flowers. Plants like coral bells bring that foliage, and it's fantastic. Now, this is also a great candidate for doing a late winter, like early March kind of refresh, where you just kind of cut them back, let them restart for the season. Easy to do, essential for maintaining your health, the health of your plants from one year to the next. Next on the list would be heathers and ericas. These plants provide a wonderful low growth with very rich colors. They look fantastic when you pair a bunch of them together, so don't be shy about adding a couple different colored varieties into the same pot of our heathers and ericas. And last but not least would be skimmia. This plant kind of resembles a laurel, but it's a little bit smaller. And this is a wonderful perennial that brings multi-season interest. So any plants that can bring interest from season to season is a winner. And these ones bring red berries in the winter time. And with that, now we have a wonderful list of some awesome perennial plants that can be grown in containers year in and year out. Now, while they can't all be grown outside all year, they all will continue to grow and mature and produce better looking plants season after season after season. Just remember, when you're selecting your plants for your containers, for your pots, that a container garden is just that. It is a garden. So we need to have lots of different plants, lots of different elements, flowering, foliage, structural plants. And with this list, I can confidently say you have the right plants at hand. Anyways, if you do have any other further perennials that you find to be excellent in containers, make sure to leave them in the comment section below. We are a growing community, and the more that we can aggregate our ideas and experiences, the better we can grow as a plant community. Thank you guys for joining me here on Plant Vibrations. I'll catch you soon. Ciao.